Podcast Friday here, and it's Heather Lee Chapman, your high performance coach. And we have a special guest here today, Thomas. And I'm bringing all the uncommon knowledge to you guys today. We had NLP practitioner earlier, and today we're going to talk about tapping into those intuitive gifts from incredible gentleman here. And I will let him tell you guys all about himself. And first, I want to leave you a question. What would life look like if we all tapped in to our intuition a little bit better? And I just want you to think about that today. And then Tom, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, I'm very honored to be here. So as Heather said, I am Thomas Trafford. I am an intuitive counselor and a medium, and I'm operating on Vancouver Island out of Bowser, British Columbia, but I also am digital and therefore worldwide. My journey is an interesting one. I think we talked a little bit before we came on that we're going to get into that. I've been doing this. The Cedarwood Sanctuary is, my child that I birthed into the world in hopes to change the world for the better and to ripple out, touch the hearts of humanity and heal people going forward. I think that's an important thing, but I'll get to that in a second. So it's been about a 4 or 5 year journey for me. I think around 2016, I started to kind of surrender to these gifts that I had and the kind of inkling and the calling from my truest self, from my gut. And around 2018, 2019, the Cedarwood Sanctuary was launched originally in Ontario before the move, and then moved across the country and had a global pandemic. So been a bit of a slow start, been a bit of a learning journey, learning curve.
Just a journey. God, that entrepreneur journey is such a spiral. And the beauty is we just keep going and going. It gets better and better. And we got more skills and tips and tricks we learned along the way. And thank God that you built that, because now you can turn around and show other people how to be so resilient. Well,
thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And we learn from each other and we set the example. And that's the thing, when you have a calling, so to speak, it's hard to walk away from it, right? So no matter how the punches or the timelines and logistics, you end up having to keep going. Exactly. Yeah. So now we're well established. I have online clients and in-person clients, and basically what my approach is, or my modality for the Cedarwood Sanctuary, is kind of a mix between talk therapy and mediumship. So I like to joke with everyone, the fastest way to say it is just psychic therapy. It ends up, it's an interesting thing. All of my sessions now have come to a very similar place where it's really about the sitter, right? And I think your call as well with the Own It Empire is to help people and to galvanize them and allow them to know their potential. And I think I'm doing a very similar thing from more, I guess, an emotional lens. That's, I guess, what ends up coming through a lot, right? So the mediumship is one thing, and to connect with someone's guides or their loved ones that have passed, and to get all the messages that are coming through for them. But my interest in kind of humanity and humans, individuals, and how they operate, I have a long history with counseling and grief work, grief counseling for children, and anxiety coaching and life coaching. So I kind of applied that to this. So it's one thing to hear a message from grandma, the will is underneath the floorboards. But also, like, you're a person and you're sitting in front of me and you're getting this information. And if that's someone that was really special to you in your lifetime, that's going to do something to you. There's going to be energy that's stirred. You're going to have reactions, feelings, you're going to leave the session and be living your life with that going on. So where I kind of go with it is like, well, how are you doing? Where are you at? And let's talk about how these messages sit with you and where they land, and what you're doing in life, what even brought you to come see me, and how can we kind of use these messages and interpret them for your betterment and for your kind of healing, for your journey, whatever that journey looks like, right? Where does it land with you, and where do you go from here? And sometimes that turns into multiple sessions, and I have a 3 and 6 session package. And so, some people want to continue to work on whatever the thing is that comes up, and some people just like the one-off because they like to hear the messages from spirit. Yeah.
The integration is so important, though. And then often when we get those messages, it shoots us into like a new growth channel that is easier when we're guided and we have that mentorship. So I love the ability to be able to stay, get the messages that you need, but that guidance and the counseling component, right? The integration of it, the application of it. Because I remember
Yeah.
doing this session and being like, I'm not alone. Going home and being like, okay, thank God I'm going back to see her next week.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You have a support system in place, right? And I mean, I certainly know from my experience, I would assume you're the same, that any practitioner that we meet that has that is really honed in on that skill set of genius, like you were saying, they're really valuable. Your toolkit can be as big as you want it to be. You can have, you know what I mean? You can have a team of internet psychics, you can have therapists, you can have coaches, you can have all the things that help you get to where you want to go. And I think that's ultimately something that we would both agree on in our work, is people knowing their worth, right? People knowing what their value is and believing that. I think that's a huge first step. You know, I'm
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm just coming off of my second business bliss, so thank you very much for your genius.
You're
Um,
welcome.
and I hear it too in the teaching. You were talking about manifestation, or things that perhaps other systems have forgotten to mention certain things about that vibration, right? And
Yeah.
about how we kind of call forth. And that ends up coming up for me in a lot of my sessions with clients. But for me, it comes down to it becomes a really interesting conversation around the self-worth and the self-love piece, right? Who ultimately, what I end up asking is like, who do you think you are? What is your, how would you define yourself? Do you think you're, an organic being, the same as plant and animal, that just lives a life cycle and dies off? That's interesting. We can go there. I'm going to meet you where you're at, right? It's all about acceptance and no judgment. What do you think about other? Why are you even here? You want to hear from maybe a spirit guide, or an angel, or a past loved one. So you obviously believe there's more realms than this one that we can see and touch and hear and feel. So, okay, that's interesting. Where do you put yourself in that spectrum, right? Because ultimately, if you can find and believe your grandeur, then you can begin the steps that of the manifestation, and of gathering, and of playing with that power, right? And I think a lot of people don't quite know how to step into that seat of power, and that's the interesting thing that I like to do when I'm working with spirit and the client, is just show them their gorgeousness,
I love it. I actually wrote in
Yeah.
my journal this morning about owning my magic. I called it my
Hmm.
magic today. I always called it my power, but today I called it my magic because I manifested a new car yesterday, and I'm really grateful about it. And I'm so happy. I think it's so sexy. And I
Cool.
wrote about owning my magic. That was my business bliss this time. The computer we're on was January's business bliss, and every time it's something new. And
Awesome.
and yeah, it's about really owning. And I know for some people, maybe, oh, they're going magic. Okay, well, it's also quantum physics, and you could call it what you want.
Exactly. Exactly. I've been saying that recently too, because I've gone back to the magic word, which I haven't used since I was a kid. But I'm kind of like, yeah, come for me. Like it is other things, quantifiable scientific things. Energy is measurable. But a really fast word that we've used for centuries is magic. And it also is that.
Yeah, and there's also that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And sometimes when it happens so fast, you're like, okay, that's magic, right? Like I think
Yeah.
that's what they were calling magic. I think they
Yeah.
nailed that down back then, and there was a scientific base to it, and it's not all woo woo. And I'm just really excited for the next thing that's coming. This was
Exactly. The
really this
synchronicities, right? Once you get into that playground and in that seat of power, the synchronicities almost come so quickly that, like, the doubt evaporates. You can't deny it anymore. That's why I come back to the word magic. You're like, oh, there's no other. I'm clearly like, I have strings attached to me, and I'm playing with energy, right? I'm moving energy fields. I'm moving my own energy fields, and therefore rippling out to the world I'm living in and how I'm seeing and experiencing existence, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it becomes undeniably so, which is really interesting.
The mind thinks in pictures, and I think you just maybe created one of
Mm,
the best analogies that may go down in the history of time. It's like you have a bunch of strings, and you're a puppet, and
mhm,
there's
mhm,
puppets maybe even on the end or whatever it is, and you're moving those strings, and you're moving your energy and moving yourself in alignment with it. And I think that's what it is.
mhm.
Like every thought, every feeling, and every action is like pulling on a string, and it's whether you're moving that item you desire closer to or farther away from you based on, was that thought in belief of achieving it, or was that thought in doubt of achieving
Right.
it? Were you thinking about all the ways it could work, or were you thinking about all the ways it can't work? And each one of those is pulling a string, and one of them is either moving it closer or farther away.
Right. I absolutely agree. And that's, if you go with that analogy, it's like, why is this string in my hand? Like, what am I doing with this? Where was this attached to? Did it come from me? Did it come from someone else? And where am I putting it? Right. So you have to sort of start to sort through yourself, right? That's part of the journey. And it's something really interesting that comes up for me and my clients. And that's where the counseling comes in. It's like, okay, so where are you at? Are all these strings, jealousy, external validation, and
Mm,
feelings of lack? Okay, well, we know what kind of tapestry we're weaving then. And you don't really need me to affirm that, but you know what I'm saying? And then if you start to move them around, play with them, and grab other ones, suddenly you're weaving a tapestry of your reality that is like not what you ever expected it to be. And that's where the scale slides so quickly that you're like, oh, okay,
yeah.
it's no longer beneficial to me to stay in these feelings of lack, these feelings of low self-worth, these feelings of needing external validation. Those things are truly hindrances, right? And when you start to work with the energy that palpably, you sort of see that. You can tell as soon as you shift or come into alignment, whichever way you want to do it. But as soon as you click into alignment with your higher self, or with something that's more truly who you are in your divine self, and not necessarily the version of you that society, your lifetime, your family have created, as soon as you click into alignment with that, things shift without you trying very hard. That's the ease that
Yeah.
you talk about, a business bliss that I very much know as well, and definitely try to pass on to my clients. And so that ease is a beautiful place to operate from, because you suddenly can breathe a little lighter. Your shoulders aren't as heavy,
Yeah.
and you kind of get a second to go like, oh, maybe I am okay. Oh, maybe I can do this. And that's where those little seeds of self, the I always use bucket, like the bucket of self-worth and self-love, you start to fill that back up, right? The drops, or the seeds, are
Mhm.
going in. As that fills, so too does your horizon, your sense of self, your power, your possibility. And so suddenly, in using the business bliss model of like the 90-day, suddenly 90 days later, you're it's a completely different reality. You're more galvanized, you feel more happy, confident. People are noticing, your friends and family are like, what's gotten into you? And you're like, decided to shift my point of perception. I decided to move some energy, and by doing that, I've healed myself, right? Because a lot of that heaviness is from our wounds. And so we sit in our wounds, and we use those wounds to create our narrative of who we think we are. And so that just is us. Then we're stuck there. We are this person with these wounds, and this is my story, and here's who I am now. And that's valuable because it is how you perceive yourself, and it's valuable because on some level it's where you came from. But the value of that is being able to see it from a different perspective, and then change it, and then walk away from it, then heal it. And as we transmute the pain and the heaviness that we all carry, I mean, that's really why I got into it. I started to notice I was in, 9 to 5 corporate marketing, and I was like walking around the office, and in being meetings, and I was like, this isn't making my heart sing, what we're doing. And I'm looking around the room, and I'm sorry, there's no way it's making any of your heart sing. So like, what are we doing? Are we like lying to ourselves every day? Like, that's weird, right? So like, let's examine that. And a lot of that perception of who we are and what we should be doing comes from some baggage, some wounds, some stuff we've been dragging through our lives.
It's
And
a
as
sack
soon
of
as
shit that I call it.
yes, exactly, a very heavy sack of shit. Yeah,
Yeah, it's very
yeah,
heavy.
yeah.
Right,
So
so you cut that string.
yeah, exactly. You cord cut that. You figure it out. It like teaches you the lessons it taught you. It is who you were, and you honor that. It's like, the other thing that I find really important, and I'm sure you do too, is the judgment piece of it. We're so wired um to think through the filter of judgment, and fascinatingly, it's the worst when we apply it to ourselves. Everyone says you're your own worst critic, right? Especially artists. They finish the piece, everyone else is
Gooey over
cooing
it.
over it. Yeah. And they're like, oh no, I don't like it. And I'm guilty of that too. So we really are hard on ourselves in a way that doesn't get us very far in terms of our goals. It becomes the inner saboteur, right? And so, I don't have time for that anymore. You know what I mean? You just get
Yeah.
to,
Get
right?
to a point where you make a decision. It's like a hard stop because when you were saying about the 90 days and needing like a telescope to look back, I remember when I first started, and my mom had been teaching me a lot of this for so long, and I thought, oh, it works, it doesn't work, it works, it doesn't work. And I wasn't sure if it worked because I didn't have all the keys, and it worked sometimes, but not all the times. And then I really started to study and understand there's like a kind of a science to it. Like if you do this, A plus B equals C. But if you do A plus D, you're going to get an F, right? And I started to get some clarity around it. And every time you do it and you manifest, whether it's a car or a computer or a rose, we were talking about that on the other podcast. I started with a parking spot.
Right.
It was like that simple. It actually was a rose first, and the rose wasn't working. I was like, yes, I'm not getting a rose. No one wants to buy me roses. I'll buy myself roses. And so then it was a parking spot, and then and so on and so forth. And now it's a car, right? A computer, a client, tripling the revenue. The beauty of it is we just have to start somewhere and start to unpack the shit, right?
Yep.
And just we build that faith and that belief so that we get to a point where we're like, okay, I just know I can't be in the negative. I can't be in the victim. I can't be there, because especially when you start to you feel like a magnet.
Yes.
And when you go there, everything in your life goes there too. And you're like, no, totally off path, not working.
Yes.
It's not good. It's not easy. That's my sign. Okay. What do I need to do to bring it back? Do I need to take a day off and go hug a tree and play the guitar and dance and sing and nap and do whatever, brings me joy, and then come back to it? Then that's what we need to do. Yes. All of that. Yes.
Right.
And then it brings me back. And so for everyone listening, just really, it's like a practice that you build, and the faith comes the more you do it.
Yes.
And there's just so much we don't know. It's not taught in traditional models of, how to truly clear the limiting beliefs, the trauma, how to work with. And when I say energy, I started saying energy because people started asking me, what is metaphysical? And I was like, okay. So if we talk about energy, like it's the same way we're talking right now, and you're on the other side of Canada. Right. It's going through a frequency. It's a signal, right? And it's transferred, and it's all simultaneous.
Right.
And that's energy. And
that's also the quantum field. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have an energy being, and we are electrical, right? And we are connected to that field. And when we look at it from a scientific perspective, you really are pulling strings. And we know that thoughts have a thought impulse, and they can be measured, and your thought goes out into the ether and other people can pick it up. And this is measurable. And I just want to bring the conversation and really get right down to that so that people can start to see that it's not woo-woo. A lot of this is scientifically proven and it works. It's just not commonly known. And I remember when I first started, I dated a guy at the time. It was like, everyone's calling you a hippie. I was like, let them. and now, I'm happy to be that hippie. I coined a term, and we called ourselves BIPPY, Business Bohemian Hippies.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah.
It's the name of the first blog that we made, but it was Vegan Secret. But BIPPY was it. And that was a late night minds, like brain dumping. We're like, what will we call it? What designs us? We're not hippies, but like we're business women, but we're kind of bohemian and could just travel, like, but within work from our cell phones. So like, what would that look like? And that's a BIPPY. Anyways, back to it. There's science behind this. And if traditional ways of getting what you want are not working, it's time to do some exploration. So we have some bonus tips for you today. So dive in. Any tips and tricks you want to share so people can own it and step into that next best version of themselves.
Sure, absolutely. Before that, just to touch on what you were just saying, the way that I explain that, it's so true. Like I remember at some point learning that the electromagnetic field that our hearts give off is about 10 feet around us, right? And so if you think about the fact that you're emanating a 10-foot energetic measurable bubble around you, is that you? I'll ask clients that all the time. Do you feel like that's, so if that's coming from your heart, do you still consider that you? Is that what you would call your aura? Is that what you would call your spirit? Now you can understand why when you're sitting beside someone on a bus and they have a bad energy, you can feel it. You're sitting in their bubble, right? So like little things like that allow the mind to understand it, because you're right, we all have our story and our baggage, and a lot of us have stuff around belief and have stuff around faith. And that's something I confront a lot, right? Where it didn't serve them because not it was not all encompassing. It was a
Yeah.
judgmental system, right? And so that's the difference there. And in terms of the measurable part of it, I was saying the other day to somebody, think about the spectrum of light, right? Everything it comes down to vibration, right? And so the spectrum of light, we can see what our eyes can see, but we know that there's infrared and we know that there's night vision goggles. So we know our technology gives us the ability to see part of the spectrum that our eyes can't. Same with the ears. Think about dog whistles, right? We can't hear them, but dogs can. So we are very viscerally aware that there's things outside of our senses that exist. And that's the same with the metaphysical. That is the metaphysical, right? So, whether or not you can tell that grandma's beside you, or you kind of have a feeling that she is. I mean, she probably is, right? Because that energy is being picked up. So, yeah. So for me, again, going back to the self-care and the self-love. I mean, I think that is a thing people carry. My kind of mission statement, I would say, is that I have observed through my 40 years on the earth that people are carrying around a lot of pain. And I think it's been really normalized for many, many reasons, for hundreds of years, for lots of different influences. But it's been very normalized to kind of just walk around with a lot of pain. And so, again, it's not dismissing those wounds or that point of pain. It's addressing it, right? Because it can be transmuted. So my intention for my own life, and therefore my intention for everyone I work with, is to understand that, look at it compassionately without judgment, own who you are, meet yourself where you're at, and then through working on it energetically and with different tools, meditation, counselors, all the things, journaling, you get to a place where you can kind of transmute that pain. And as soon as you transmute it, you end up with space. You suddenly have more capacity. And that capacity can be filled with expansion. It can be filled with your potential. It can be filled with your joy. It can be filled with your manifestation of who you truly are. So it's almost like so you know what I mean? Like, the more you can do that, the more you can transmute those narratives, that old story, that baggage, that pain. The more space you have to flourish, to fly, to sit in that power, and to truly be the bigness of your soul that wants to come through. So, like, I think a number one thing I would want people to ask themselves, it's hard, I get it, don't come for me yet, wait till the end, but is like, are you here for a reason? And if you're here for a reason, what is it? And my belief structure is that everyone is. So, it took me a really long time to figure out what really makes my heart sing. And I think that that's kind of a key thing, because if no matter what it is, even if everyone around you is thinking it's strange, but you're doing an activity, you're doing something, you're reading about something in a book or watching something on a show, and you're like, I didn't know people did that. And your heart sings, you have that feeling of almost like the universe is inside your chest. That is your higher self, your meta self, whatever you want to say, your oversoul, like screaming at your earthly self to listen. So you have to listen to that, right? So I think everyone has a version of that, and therefore everyone has a reason they're here. Once you kind of, or as you're figuring that out, as you're working toward that, you're going to have to face some stuff. There's some dark corners in your closet. There's some cobwebs. There's some boxes you haven't gone through in a while. There's a sack of shit attached to you didn't even know you were dragging around. So that kind of, as in the esoteric world, at least, they call that the dark night of the soul. But and I think personally, I think it's more like the tides. I think you work through some stuff, and then you get some clarity and some expansion, and then it comes back tidally, and you work through some more stuff. So it's a journey, I mean, when we first talked, Heather, I was telling you, like, I own the moments that feel I've slipped back into another version of me. And I think there's a reason for that, whether or not it's rest or acceptance, integration. There are moments where I think you need to be like, okay, I can't always be zen on a mountain cross-legged, right? Fair enough. We all live a life. We all have jobs and bills. But I think working in that, the biggest tool I can say is the self-care. And I think it's really interesting. The more and more clients I talk to, the self-care comes up as instantly. It's guilt. You have guilt. Well, I shouldn't really take the time. And like, well, my mom does need help, and I can't be at the spa, and all those things. So there's this perception, I think we live in a very grind culture, right? And
Mhm.
I mean, look at your story, right? In Business Bliss, about like I didn't even have more hours in the day I could possibly work, and
Literally.
it wasn't doing what you wanted to do. You weren't putting out in the world what you wanted to put out, right? So taking that time to care for yourself, however that looks, if that's 10 minutes of journaling, if that's, another practitioner was saying 5 to 10 minutes a day where you just stare out the window and
Mm.
you don't judge the thoughts, you don't try to have thoughts, but you're just
Just
being, you're
be.
just practicing being. That does
Mhm.
a world of difference for the way that your thoughts work. My other thing in terms of mindfulness is really watching the self-talk. I think that's really important. I mean,
Yeah.
all talk. Don't be rude to other people and be nice to yourself. So, all of it. But like in terms of a vibration, like words carry a vibration. Words carry power. In terms of those strings, it's not just a joke. You're not just saying it if it's causing a bit of pain for someone. That is not something that I want to put into the world, right? So think about your ripples. Be mindful of that and think about how we talk to ourselves.
Yeah.
I can't believe sometimes I just giggle to myself because I don't even I used to have such typical assumed thought loops, right? And
Mm.
you could almost know what my internal dialogue would be given any situation that I was in. And now I giggle at myself that I don't speak negatively to myself. And if a negative thought comes up, or which is, I would say, a flag from your wound, or a flag from the inner child that is still in a little bit of pain, I recognize it. I thank it. I think that's the usefulness of our ego. We go like, okay, so I
Thank
had
you.
that thought. That was a bit of a jealous thought. That was a bit of a bitchy thought. Surprise on that one. Okay, obviously, then I have something else to look at here. Obviously, I'm still a little hurt by this person, or there's something I feel is unsaid. I'm holding on to something because that wasn't kind, and that came really quickly without me being able to kind of, so being mindful and watchful of your thoughts and therefore your words, especially when it comes to the self, really helps you land and center and come to a place where you can observe more. And the observation versus the being in the rat race, in your mind, in the hamster wheel, that's where that power starts, right? And that's the vantage point from which you can kind of see like, oh, I've talked really negatively to my body for like years. And oh my God, my poor body, like I need to apologize to my body.
I'm
And,
so sorry it took me 35 years to love you.
yes. And I still sometimes do it, and I catch myself a lot now. But I remember once I was doing a healing, and they said to just talk to your heart, and I thought it was the weirdest thing. Speaking of woo woo hippies, and and then I did it, and I burst into tears, and I was like, I didn't cognitively think of having a relationship with my organ. You know what I mean? You're not like, hello, hand, thank you for existing. But a lot of people do that. And now I get why. Because I think even in our regular day to day, oh, I'm not going swimming. My muffin top, or like, oh God, I didn't get my back waxed. I'm so ugly. All those come so quickly, so easily. And that's not true. That's
Yeah.
not true. And it's not who you are. And it's not self-loving ultimately, right? So those are the things that I put into a kind of heavier, lower, more dense vibration that kind of are then a hindrance to the potential and the you that you want to be. There's a version of you that your oversoul is like really hoping you figure out in this lifetime, because you incarnated for a reason with a list of things to do and a list of actions to have. So, let's not leave them waiting too long, and let's work through our humanity, the stuff we carry that's a bit heavier, to hear that song. We all have our own unique vibration. There's a lot of people that do the voice work, right? That talk about our voices being like a fingerprint, right? We have specific energy in our tone. That's beautiful, right? Don't So all of those things, I think that it's letting yourself go. It's surrender to me, which I know is hard to do again.
Yeah.
Surrendering is hard. And the permission. You talk a lot in the workshops I've taken from you about the permission, and that's specifically in a business point of view, but like for your whole life, right? There's so many things. You won't have the ice cream because we're counting calories. But ultimately, if you follow that thought, it's because, well, don't think I look good with my shirt off. Okay, so that's you're punishing yourself for your body that carries your consciousness around all day on earth. It's all those things that I think they all come down to the self-love. They all come down to self-care, and how you're treating yourself is the building block of your capacity to heal yourself, heal others, to be there for people in your community that you want to be there for, to support your family, and then to do the thing that is your calling and to, expand, right?
Capacity to show up in life.
Yeah,
Your
for
capacity to
everything.
show up in life and your capacity to show up in a quality of life that you enjoy.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
I'm actually really grateful. My father is very athletic, and it was a non-negotiable for us. So
Okay.
like movement was a thing. And as soon as he's like, "Oh, I got a new bike," and he's like, "Have you gone out on it yet?" And I'm like, "No." And I'm 35. He's like, "You need to be out every morning." I'm like, "Okay." Right? And it's that self-care. It was a non-negotiable. Like it was
Right.
always self first, and you lose that over time. And
Right.
as I said, I got there at a point in time, and I've been through the cycle. And now, with everything that you're saying, I just want to say that when we hear ourselves being mean to other people or to ourselves, just take that as a hint. Or if you reacted to somebody, then there was a trigger there. We like to call it a trigger. So what did it
Hmm.
trigger in you? Because our perception is our projection of self. So what we can't see in the environment, what we don't have in our programming. And so your program is completely different than my programming. So I say it, and I've said it before many times. We go on vacation and we come back and we write we had the same experiences, but we're going to write a completely different experience of it
Hmm. Hmm.
because of our perception. And
Hmm.
when we have those triggers, I want everyone, instead of getting mad and making yourself bad and wrong, or I still have more to heal, or I was mean to that person, I just joke. I'm like, please forgive Heather from 90 days ago. She's no longer here.
Right.
She wasn't going through the transformation tornado. It might not have been her best self. Now she's back, and I will be kind going forward. But I want us to know that it's feedback. All of it is feedback, and we
Right.
only, by making it mean something, good or bad, is what is now setting that new imprint in our programming. So take
Right.
it as feedback. Thank you for the contrast, or thank you for shining the light that there's some growth there or healing to do. And now I can move forward. And as you said, it's coming from that eagle eye perspective, that observer perspective, and observing that what's happened and not putting a meaning to it, not making ourselves bad and wrong, because that's where I used to sit. Very strict
Yes.
upbringing, need to be perfect, need to do this, got to do everything to the top of the line. And if you don't, then what I'd actually do is sit in the bad and wrong for so long to
Yes.
myself.
Yeah.
Which, do you know what that brings? More experiences of the
Right.
same. Instead, now I can be like, oh yeah, okay, so I do that better next time. And I don't need to get stuck in the junk for as long. And then I can move forward, and I take the feedback. Thank you for the feedback. And I can move forward. And guess what? The feedback never stops.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
It's literally an infinite journey.
Yes, and energy is attracted like, right? So if you're sitting in that place of, oh God, I did it wrong, that there's that's comforting. You've probably been there a lot of your life. There's coping mechanisms around that, all the things, right? From the wound, from not feeling like enough, again, the self-worth. And so, like you're saying, the energy is attracted to itself. You're sitting there more time than you're learning from it, moving on and dusting off, then you're going to get more of that, right? And so that is those strings we're talking about. And the other thing I wanted to mention from what you just said is um, emotional awareness. I think it plays a huge part, because if you think about the emotions on that scale, emotions having, each one having its own note, musical note, its own vibration, right? So obviously, the emotions of anger, grief, fear, they're all lower on the scale, and therefore that's why they have that heavier feeling density. And then the ones, love, joy, bliss, those are all higher on the scale, right? So that's the other thing about the memory too. Like, our memory is written by emotion. You come back from a trip with your best friend, you're going to write a different story, because you both felt different things at different times, even though you were in the same place. So I mean, that's an art. We can get into it another day about everyone having their own reality, but that's an argument about that, right? But our emotional story, our emotional journey, it creates our memory, and therefore our reality. So if you have a trauma from your past that you're carrying because you were so wounded, and your emotional experience was so scary and dense and whatever, that is going to stay as every time you think about that situation, that's going to stay like that. So being aware of the concept of, watching your emotions, that's the joy of that higher perspective as well, is you can watch your emotions. So your emotions are not you. Your emotions are not who you are. That's a really important one, right? If you can start to take 3 deep breaths when you have a big emotion come up, because I know it's very hard to get a big emotion and not react from it. I get that. It's hard to do. But if you can take a few deep breaths when you get a big emotion coming up and start to look at it, okay, well, why am I feeling so angry? It's not about, I think, the thing that just happened. There's a story behind why that anger is coming up, because it is a trigger, right? And so whether positive or negative, wherever we are on the emotional scale, that's the feedback. Our emotions are the feedback loop. We're learning through what we're feeling. And of course that writes our story and writes our memory. So if we can figure that out, transmute some of those painful ones, and get to a place where we're feeling more love, light, bliss, and connection and compassion for every human being in more of our day, the possibility is endless, right?
Absolutely. And more love and compassion for every single human being in every day and everything we do. That
In
is
every interaction.
cool.
Yeah.
In every interaction. That is definitely cool. Absolutely. Beautifully well said. Oh
Oh,
my
thank
God.
you.
Okay, guys, if you want more of this and this good stuff, so what is the last things you want to let everybody know, and where can they find you? And first of all, just thank you for sharing your energy and time and wisdom with us today. We are here bringing forth a new world of unity consciousness, of holistic wellness, of holistic practices. And I'm really grateful to have met you and be on this journey with you and be helping people really truly transform so that we can raise the frequency of the collective. So thank you. And where can they learn
Thank
more about
you.
you and find more?
The feeling is mutual, likewise. Yeah, so the website is a bit of a mouthful, but I like to enunciate. So it's www.thecedarwoodsanctuary.ca. And there's an intake form on there. You can read a little bit more about me. You can see the services I offer and go from there. If anyone who is listening or watching does want to move forward and reach out to me, I have a promo code for today. Own It Empire, OIE 10. So OIE 10, all caps. If you do an intake form on the website or email me directly, put that in the subject line of the email or in the body of the email, and you'll get an additional 10% off any of the services that I offer.
Thank you so much for that. What a generous gift, everybody. Jump on it.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, well, I think, I enjoy what we're both trying to do. And I think if people want to have less pain and more capacity, then hey, let's get to it, right? So that is the website, cedarwoodsanctuary.ca, and it's the same on Facebook and Instagram. Just the Cedarwood Sanctuary is the handle on both of those platforms. You can find me there and send me a direct message as well.
Amazing. So guys, we'll have everything for you in the show notes. Thank you again so much. It's such a pleasure always hanging out with you, and I'm excited to spend more time and learn more about you and all the things that you're doing and progressing and all the people you're helping. So if you want to truly own it, we have incredible conscious entrepreneurs on here all the time so that you can truly step into your greatness, design a life you love, and truly live happy and fulfilled. So expect magic and miracles, stay happy, healthy, wealthy, and what's the best that can happen? Mwah!